In Star Wars, the Imperial Star Destroyer is one of the most powerful and influential ships in its era. But what exactly made it so powerful? What exactly made every single citizen soil their trousers when they even just thought of one? Well, luckily for you guys, I'm going to be explaining everything that made the ISD so feared, from psychological strategies to physical weaponry. I'll also go over design choices and the massive interior that was basically a city on a ship. Anyways, remember to like and subscribe, grab your blue milk, and enjoy the video. To understand the Imperial class, we have to look at its parents. During the height of the Clone Wars, the Republic found itself needing a dedicated daddy battleship, something the peaceful democracy of the Republic hadn't required for thousands of years. The Victory class, designed by Walix Blissix, was the first real step toward the dagger profile. It was heavy, it was powerful, and it could even enter the atmosphere, a rarity for ships of that size. However, it lacked the speed to keep up with the evolving Separatist fleet. Then came the Venator class. We all know it as the Jedi Cruiser. Built by Quat Drive Yards, the Venator was a masterpiece of carrier-based warfare. It could carry hundreds of starfighters, featuring a massive flight deck that split the ship open like a ribcage. But as the Clone Wars drew to a close and the Republic transitioned into the First Galactic Empire, the needs of the Navy changed. The Empire didn't want a carrier. They didn't want a ship that relied on the heroics of the fighters themselves. They wanted a ship that represented unfiltered, centralized power. They wanted a ship that people would look at and be like, oh f***, I'm cooked. Enter Lyra Wessex, the daughter of Walix Blissix. Gosh, there's a lot of it's making it so hard to pronounce all their names. Come on, man. Lyra was a visionary who saw exactly where Palpatine's new order was heading. She took the basic triangular shape of the Venator and scaled it up to a degree that the Empire initially thought was overkill, but then they realized that there's no overkill on badass. When Lyra designed the Imperial First Class, she completely removed all the versatility that the Venator had. She stripped away the massive hangar doors on the top of the ship, replacing them with thick slabs of durasteel plating. She ended up deciding to move the hangars to the underside of the ship to protect the ship's most vulnerable launch points. The result was a ship that prioritized forward-facing power and intimidation. When a Star Destroyer entered a system, the triangular shape ensured that almost every weapon battery on the ship could be brought to bear on a single target directly in front of it. Basically, the mindset was that you automatically won the fight if your opponent didn't even want to fight you in the first place, but as we'll see later, that mindset has its drawbacks. Let's talk numbers, because once you find out the scale of the ISD, it gets pretty scary. It was 1,600 meters long, roughly 1 mile, and it had a maximum acceleration 2,300 times the force of Earth's gravity. Now, what could have powered this huge ship almost as big as your mom? Well, ladies and gents, it was none other than the SFS IA-2B solar ionization reactor. This reactor was essentially a miniature sun trapped in the heart of the ship. The sheer energy output required to move a mass of this size and power its weapon systems meant that a significant portion of the ship's internal volume was dedicated to cooling and power distribution. You can't have 10,000 5090s in your PC unless you have proper cooling for all of them. It didn't only have this, but it also had 90 XX9 heavy turbo laser batteries. These were the city killers, capable of vaporizing shielded targets from long range. It also had 60 Borstel NK7 ion cannons, designed to disable ships for capture or Imperial justice. Finally, it had 10 Phylon Q7 tractor beam projectors, ensuring that no prey could jump to light speed once the Empire had found them. You'd recognize this because the tractor beams are what sucked in the Millennium Falcon when it showed up to the ruins of Alderaan in Episode 4. In the lore, the Imperial Navy spent millions of credits on psychological research. The dagger shape is subconsciously aggressive, partly because it looks like a spearhead. When a civilian on a rebellious world would look up in the sky and see the massive gray triangle, the message was clear. The Empire is here, and you are small. The bridge tower, often criticized by fans for being a vulnerable target, was actually a deliberate choice. It sat high above the top of the ship to provide the commanding officers with a literal god view of the battlefield. It also reinforced the Imperial officers' sense of superiority over their enemies. Basically, what you'll learn as this video goes on as well is that the ISD is a huge ego feeder for the superiors in the Empire. In the early years, the Star Destroyers were seen as a symbol of stability, and it promised an end to the chaos that the Clone Wars caused. But as we'll find out soon, that stability came at a price. The design of the Star Destroyer had flaws. tiny cracks in the armor that the rising rebellion would eventually learn to exploit. To call the Imperial class a ship is almost a disservice. It is quite literally a vertical city. With a crew of over 37,000 personnel, not including a full division of 9,700 stormtroopers, the internal logistics are just pure chaos. The ship is divided into several primary zones. The primary hull houses the massive fuel slugs and the solar ionization reactor, which occupies a very big space spanning several decks. Surrounding this heart are the crew quarters, which are strictly segregated by rank. While high-ranking officers enjoy relatively spacious suites in the upper pylon with unlimited PS5s, infinite hot dogs, and any Lego set they want, the enlisted crewmen live in a hot bunking environment. These were cramped utilitarian barracks where the air is constantly recycled and the hum of the engines is a permanent vibrating noise. A lot of people don't realize how annoying that would be. Like, imagine you're eating, you're sleeping, you're going to the bathroom, everything. There's always just a low hum of the engine in the background. It's very similar to what Vader had to go through. Perhaps the most iconic area in the ISD is the command bridge. Contrary to what many think, the command bridge isn't just the big windowed room. The bridge tower is a massive superstructure containing the primary and auxiliary command centers, the communications array, and the deflector shield generators, which were those two very odd, distinct looking domes that sit atop the tower. And just a quick side note here, in the technical manuals, those domes are often identified as the ISD-72X deflector shield generator arrays, and their placement was a gamble. High enough to provide a 360-degree coverage of the entire Star Destroyer, but exposed enough to maybe allow some daring rebel who would even want to go against this huge ship in the first place to damage them. While the Imperial class moved away from the carrier-first philosophy of the Venator, its ventral hangar bay is still a marvel of efficiency. Located on the underside, the main hangar is large enough to swallow a whole CR-90 Corellian Corvette hull, or your mother. This is exactly what we saw when the Tantive IV got sucked into the bottom of the ISD in Episode 4. The vehicles that even the standard ISD carried was enough to make a planetary governor pack their bags and dip to a better life. 72 TIE Line fighters, usually organized into 6 squadrons of 12, 8 Lambda-class shuttles for high-priority transport, 20 AT-AT walkers, and 30 AT-STs stored in the heavy vehicle staging areas for ground invasions. And last but not least, 15 Imperial troop transports. The genius of the hangar design is the rack system. TIE fighters don't have landing gears, they're suspended from ceiling rails that can rapidly move them into launch positions. This allows the ISD to vomit an entire fighter team in the matter of minutes, causing their opponent to be overwhelmed with swarming TIE fighters. The men and women aboard the ISD are the elite of the Imperial Navy, but life aboard is the life of Imperial coldness. Unlike the Rebellion, where the pilot might know the mechanic's name, the Empire was built on mystery and discipline. The bridge pits are the most famous example of this. The 2 sunken walkways on the bridge keep the crusty musty technicians and mid-level officers literally below the eye line of the senior captain or admiral. Once again, if you didn't know this already, every high-ranking officer in the Empire has an unfathomably high ego. On a ship with 37,000 people, most crew members will never meet the captain. There are entire maintenance subsections in the lower bowels of the ship that operate almost like an independent tribe. It's like a lot more miniature version of Coruscant, where you have the levels stacked on top of each other, and the higher you are, the more power you have, the more easy life is for you, and the lower, you're just cooked. And the lower and the top people never really see each other like at all. The Rebellion wasn't fighting fair. They were using small maneuverable starfighters to dart past the heavy turbo lasers. This led to the mid-war introduction of the second-class Star Destroyer, and this Star Destroyer internally mogged the crap out of the first Star Destroyer. It was like a you versus the guy she tells you not to worry about situation. On the surface, they look nearly identical, but internally the ship was a different beast entirely. The bridge tower had the most visible change. The second class basically leveled out the section between the 2 shield generators. The heavy turrets flanking the bridge were also upgraded. The Imperial I had a mix of dual-barreled turbo lasers and ion cannons. The Imperial II replaced these with massive 8-barreled batteries, which these guys were no joke. They could just obliterate ships instantly. The outside plating was reinforced with more durable durasteel, trading a slight bit of speed for significantly higher survivability. At its height, the Empire boasted over 25,000 Star Destroyers. And how does an Empire maintain thousands of these ships? The answer is the Quad Drive Yards. KDY became the industrial heart of the Empire, with massive orbital rings where dozens of ISDs could be constructed simultaneously. The resource drain was astronomical. One Star Destroyer requires enough raw ore to build a small city. By commissioning 25,000 of them, Palpatine essentially strip-mined entire sectors of the Outer Rim. This brings us to the fundamental irony of the Star Destroyer. It was so expensive and so resource-heavy that the Empire could never afford to lose one. Yet their arrogance, their belief that the ship was invincible, caused them to send the ship into battle without planning properly. This is why the rebels' cheap tactics were so effective against them. By the time of the Battle of Hoth, the Star Destroyer had reached its peak influence. It was the undisputed king of space, the mothership of all ships, the grilled of all cheeses, the Obama of all the sandwiches. If you get that, I love you. But the rumors of the Death Star were spreading, and the ideology was shifting from overwhelming force to planetary extinction. To keep a 1,600-meter vessel operational in a deep space for years at a time, the Imperial Navy had to transform the Imperial class into a self-sustaining ecosystem. When we see these ships on screen, they look like cold, silent predators, but inside, it's just an industrial mess. Every Star Destroyer functions as a massive floating factory. Deep within the mid-decks lie the general-purpose fabricators. These are high-end industrial 3D printers and foundries that allow the ship to manufacture its own parts. This includes everything from TIE Fighter wing panels to specialized cooling valves for the reactor. Without this internal manufacturing capability, the Empire's supply lines would have collapsed under the weight of maintaining 25,000 ships across the Outer Rim. Basically, each ISD can repair itself with this 3D printer, saving lots of time, lots of resources, and lots of money. Life aboard an ISD isn't just about military duty, it's about logistics. There are over 37,000 crew members, and each one needs a reason to stay disciplined. The ship houses an internal canteen and commissionary system where crewmen use Imperial credits to purchase personal items, extra rations, or luxuries like Corellian coffee. It really is like a functioning economy and society all in one ship. Similar to Coruscant, the laters of the ISD respond to wealth power. There were the upper spires, where the officers lived in quiet, carpeted halls with actual views of the stars. Then there were the mid-levels, the bustling heart of the ship, containing the mess halls, the holonet transceiver rooms, and the massive crew barracks. Finally were the lowest decks, near the reactor and engine rooms. These are often oily, hot, and dimly lit. In many lore entries, the technicians in the lower part of the ship rarely see the bridge, and the bridge officers almost never descend to the lower levels. This physical separation created a massive cultural gap within the same ship. Like mentioned earlier, the powerful were very separated from the non-powerful. Now let's circle back around and talk more about the engine that powers this huge beast. The solar ionization reactor isn't just a battery. It's a captured star held in a magnetic bottle. The power output of a single ISD is greater than a lot of planets' entire power grids. This energy is funneled through power bushings, the size of small houses. If you don't know what power bushings are, basically they're an insulating device that allows electrical conductors to pass through like walls or ground or like physical things. The sheer heat generated by this process is one of the ship's greatest internal enemies. To manage this, the ISD is equipped with a complex network of liquid nitrogen cooling loops and massive radiator fins tucked behind the main engines. If an enemy were to successfully sabotage the cooling pumps, a favorite tactic of the rebels, the ship wouldn't explode from a weapon hit. It would literally melt from its own internal heat within 30 minutes. The Star Destroyer was never meant to hunt small ships. It was designed for total orbital supremacy. Its combat doctrine is built around 3 pillars: detection, suppression, and domination. Those 2 big domes that sit on top of the bridge aren't just shields, they're long-range tracking beacons. An ISD can detect a ship dropping out of hyperspace from several systems away. This look-down, shoot-down capability meant that any single Star Destroyer could act as the command and control hub for an entire fleet. Kinda like if you had an army and every single soldier had the ability to be a general. When an ISD enters combat, it holds no punches. It utilizes something called octuple barbette turrets. These are the massive cannons flanking the bridge superstructure. These guns are so powerful that a single direct hit can vaporize a medium-sized freighter. The standard tactic was to use the ship's massive forward profile to tank incoming fire while the heavy batteries slowly turned towards the target. The ISD was one big juggernaut. Because the ship was shaped like a wedge, it could bring all 60 heavy turbo laser batteries to bear on a single point in front of it. This created a kill zone, like a splash zone from SeaWorld, except in Star Wars you would get completely obliterated without a second thought. For a rebel captain, being caught in front of a Star Destroyer's forward arc was a death sentence. A Star Destroyer isn't just a ship, it's an invasion force used to take over planets. Tucked away in the lower tiers of the ship is the Garrison staging area. This section, and just one Star Destroyer, contains enough equipment to occupy a medium-sized moon. It hosted 9,700 stormtroopers, a full legion, 20 AT-AT walkers, and 30 AT-STs like we said earlier. It also held prefabricated base components, which would basically help them construct bases very quickly on whatever planet they wanted to invade. The Empire could drop instant garrisons from the belly of the ship, allowing them to establish a fortified position on a planet's surface within hours of arrival. This is the true Imperial part of the Star Destroyer. It's not just about winning a space battle, it's about ensuring that once the battle is over, the planet below never thinks about rebelling ever again. Finally, let's take a deeper look at the bridge. The bridge of a Star Destroyer is a place of immense pressure. Because the ship is so large and so valuable, the captains are often under the direct pressure of an admiral or sometimes even inquisitors. And if one of them reports to Vader that you're not doing well at your job, well, let's just say, you're cooked. The command trench or bridge pits were designed to keep the technicians separate from the officers. This wasn't just for organization, it was to ensure that if an officer had to be slimed out by someone like Vader, the crew wouldn't stop their work. The ship is designed to function even in an atmosphere of total terror. This internal culture of fear meant that while the ship was technically perfect, the human element was often its weakest link. Officers were so afraid of making mistakes that they rarely took those creative risks that the rebellion took. For decades, the Imperial-class Star Destroyer was unbeatable. It was the ultimate predator of the galaxy. But the greatest weakness of any empire is ego. The turning point for the Star Destroyer's legacy was the Battle of Endor. Here, the Empire's reliance on centralized command and communication proved to not work so well. When the second Death Star's shield fell, the Imperial fleet was caught in a melee range with the Rebel cruisers. The loss of the Executor, the flagship of the fleet, became one of the most well-known takedowns in Star Wars history. It wasn't destroyed by a superior capital ship. It was destroyed because its bridge redundancy failed. It all got destroyed because a lone A-Wing pilot, Arvel Crenid, flew his half-broken fighter into the bridge of the Star Destroyer. This revealed a terrifying truth about Imperial engineering. They had put all their eggs in one basket. By placing the command centers in exposed towers and failing to provide secondary bridge stations deep within the armored hull, the Empire had built glass giants. After Endor, the sight of a Star Destroyer no longer meant you would soil your pants. It made you motivated to take it down. The Imperial Star Destroyer is a reminder that power without wisdom is fragile. It was a ship built to rule through fear, and it died because it couldn't adapt to a galaxy that refused to be afraid. That's going to be it for this week's video. Remember to like and subscribe and join my Discord down below if you want to talk to me and other Star Wars nerds. I will see you guys next week. Goodbye.